Hear me? Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Now that it's 6 o'clock, we'll get started. Pastor Dan, could you give the invocation?
Gladly. Dan Meisick, Ignite Church, Freeport. I'd like to read from 1 Corinthians 12. In fact, the human body is not one single part, but rather many parts mingled into one. So if the foot were to say, since I'm not a hand, I'm not a part of the body, it's forgetting that it still is a vital part of the body. And if the ear were to say, since I'm not an eye, I'm not really part of the body, it's forgetting that it is an important part of the body. Think of it this way. If the whole body were just an eyeball, how could it hear sounds? And if the whole body were just an ear, how could it smell different fragrances? But God has carefully designed each member and placed it in the body to function as He desires. A diversity is required, for if the body consisted of one single part, there wouldn't be a body at all. Let's pray. Father, I thank you that you have designed every part of the body to work together. I thank you, Lord, that you have designed, even within this city government, to have different voices, different responsibilities. And Lord, I thank you that you honor each of those responsibilities. I thank you, Lord, that you grant wisdom for every role, for every responsibility. I thank you, Lord, that you are increasing a spirit of honor and collaboration among these distinguished people. I also pray, Lord, just that there is continued safety for every single service person, for every single citizen. I just declare forward a new level of safety. I'm so thankful, Lord, for the empowerment on our police department in their success. Lord, we just know that you are granting such a victory. I thank you, Lord, also for a new mindset to recognize every blessing, even to stop and smell the roses and recognize that it is a beautiful day that you have made, Lord. So we place this day in your hands. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Dan. And now we will officially call the Committee of the Whole to order. Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Mayor Miller.
Here.
Alderpersons Clem.
Here.
McClanathan is absent. Ross.
Here.
Parker.
Here.
Busker.
Here.
Brashaw.
Here.
Keister.
Here.
And Chesney.
And if you could please stand and join us with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Alderman Ross.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Alderman Ross, the meeting is yours.
Okay, we can start with the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Approval of the agenda has been made by, motion been made by Alderman Bradshaw, seconded by Alderman Keister. All those in favor?
Aye.
No comments. Okay, we can move on to item number 5. Approval of the minutes from the Committee of the Whole, which was held on August 13th, 2018. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So move.
Second.
Okay.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
I didn't hear it, sorry.
Motion made by Alderman Parker and Alderman Keister. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, do the same. The motion passes. Public comments. There are no public comments tonight. Discussion of ordinance 2018-40, which will be held by City Manager Crow.
Actually, I'd like to turn this over to Attorney Cox for his presentation as we move forward.
Oh, good evening. Again. So we're back here on the solar standard, the ordinance for the permitted use. As the council will no doubt remember this, we discussed this at length at the last Committee of the Whole. It went up with significant changes to the council meeting, and I think was wisely laid back over to this committee for further discussion. One of the primary issues, I believe, that was problematic, and it was an issue which was raised at the Planning Commission as well, was the addition of ground mount solar panels in residential neighborhoods. That was something which the Planning Commission recommended be a special use, and the folks at SolSmart had urged us strongly to consider making a permitted use. So I had come to you, I believe, with the last incarnation of this ordinance with sort of a meet in the middle sort of standard. There was a 600 square foot or 25% of the usable area limitation that was recommended that would still be a permitted use. So that's what's up for, I think, primarily for discussion tonight. And I'd be interested in what the council has to say about that, any direction for me. Again, my point in all of this is not to push something on the council by any means. It's to present something to you which meets your approval. So I'm working for you, trying to get this down the way that that this board wants things to, or how this board wants things to work.
Council, if you have any question, please speak with me now. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. Steve, if we were to look at I think probably the only sticking point that I would have would be the ground mounts. My understanding is that out of planning that the ground mounts were not included, and perhaps we could look through this and maybe strike a compromise where we could offer a special use permit, which would give area residents an opportunity to weigh in on the issue, but still allow some flexibility. Is there any feeling?
Well, and I think that was the feeling of the Planning Commission. So I think if the council wanted to go that direction, what you could do is say that in residential, ground mounts are a special use. You know, so we've got a permitted use standard for roof mounts if they meet certain requirements, but ground mounts are a special use, and then you could impose specific restrictions on those special uses and clearly define that. So what you would effectively do is slide that box that we created with the last go-round of the ordinance, which was intended for the permitted use, and say that a special use is permitted, would be allowable after a hearing, so long as it met those requirements. So shift it from permitted into special use, utilizing the same language. And I think that prevents a large installation in residential and still provides the protections.
And this special use would come in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals first and then go in front of the Planning Commission. So it would have two reviews prior to coming to council. First, the ZBA for fact finding, make sure that it meets the zoning regulations, and then to the Planning Commission for their review and recommendation to council, if that's the way the council's desire is to go forward with it.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Alderman Houston.
Oh, as hard as it is to believe, I have to agree with Alderman Chesney on this. Putting it in the yard like that and stuff does have effect on other people's property and stuff, and just having a regular permit does not give any of the neighbors and stuff a chance to voice their opinion on it. And I do have a problem with that. So I do think that we need to go the direction of special use permit rather than just a straight permit on that for ground mounts.
Mr. Chair.
Alderman Glenn.
A couple things, Mr. Cox. First one being, what if it was limited by the amount of power that could be used? You know, how much consumption could be in that period? That could greatly limit the size of what the piece of equipment is, correct?
Yes, and I suppose under that analysis, it would only get smaller. I'm just thinking about technology changes, so that what it takes. But if there were a limitation on the, you know, say the nameplate capacity, that's always an easy one to regulate because it says literally on the nameplate what the capacity of any installed equipment is. That would be another way to go about that. So by limiting the space, you're limiting, I think, the aesthetic impact. You know, you're specifically addressing that. By addressing the power output, I think you're addressing more, are you using it for just your house, or are you trying to sell this out to the grid, et cetera? So I think either way has merit.
On the, Steve, on the 600 square feet, or Andrew, you guys too weigh in on this, on the 600 square feet or the square footage like that, could they get enough power out of that to really sell on the grid, or would they be basically talking about their own use?
The 625 square, I'm sorry, I said 600, it's actually 625.
That's okay.
That number gets to under, there's different types of solar panels, some are more
Sure.
efficient than others, but under the ones that you're going to see generally on the market, which are the most affordable and somebody's going to put in, particularly in a residential install, 625 square feet is going to give you in a standard installation approximately the 10,000 kilowatt hours that you're going to need to run your average residence in the Midwest. So that 625 is right at, basically at the limit of what you would need to run your house. Any more than that, you're going to be selling out to the grid. So that's actually where that 625 came from.
So actually, if you go by that footage, a lot or a house is basically going to supply enough for its own house and not be able to supply a heck of a lot more. So in other words, my only fear is if you restrict it to that 625 like it is, it seems like people won't go around trying to scavenge your lots that aren't worth anything to put solar on them. Does that make sense?
So one of the things that we've done in the changes is we've ensured that the empty lots cannot be turned into mini solar farms. So that was one of the changes we took out of the last discussion. That we've already made that change within this ordinance.
Okay. And the last thing, if I could, we talked about before during the discussion about the special use permit. The only problem I had with the special use permit was maybe now with the committee switching around and stuff, it may be different, but a special use permit was so costly and so lengthy a time to take and get a decision on it. I mean, I'd like to see something sooner if that could be done, you know, sooner and less money for the person.
So with the special use, just to take it through, so the zoning board of appeals meets the first week, the planning commission meets the second week, so it would come to council on the third week if they have everything in, the builder does. But it would still have to have an ordinance to go forward for special use, so it would have to go through 2 readings. So basically from the start to the end, it's about 5 to 6 weeks, depending on how much break there is between the sessions.
Chair?
Go ahead.
And I think that the proposal, Tom, with the special use is to encourage roof mount applications. And my concern would be is here's what's going to happen. While we've talked about this in length on the council floor, these are videotaped, these are on our website, these are broadcasted, it's in the paper, it's on the radio. There's still, the majority are not aware of solar and what our plan is. So the challenge that we're going to have is the very first solar project that goes up that somebody doesn't like, they're going to say, how does this happen? If it's a roof mount, I don't think it's an impediment. If it's a ground mount, even with the tight restrictions, I still think it's wise to have the ability for people to weigh in on the project. And if they're notified and it's certified, then it's like, well, did you go to the zoning? Well, then it's on them. And then they had an opportunity to speak. Absent that, what you're going to end up having is just a lot of unhappy people coming to City Hall wanting to know why they didn't know about it. And even if we go through the list of all the things that we've done to make them aware, I still think that there needs to be a process. But I also would say it's intentionally would be structured to encourage them to go on the roofs. However, absent that, they're going to have to spend a few $100 and wait 5 weeks. You know, I think that that's just going to be the exchange for proper disclosure and notice. Is going to be an added cost in 5 weeks' time.
Mr. Chair.
Alderman Keister.
One question I have, and I think Alderman Clem brought up a good point on the power ability of the panels. The problem is, I don't know much about that. So if we start regulating the actual power output of these panels, how much actual difference is that going to make in the size of those panels with one versus the other? I mean, you say that the 625 square feet that you're talking about now provides enough for a house. Okay, if we drop that back a little bit so they can save some money but still have to buy a little energy, what does that look like as far as in size? I mean, if we cut the power, increase the power output, what kind of size variation are we going to have?
Well, what it comes to is two things. One is currently there's different efficiencies of solar panels, and as you can imagine, the more efficient they are, the smaller they are. It's like, you know, our cell phones aren't in bags anymore; they get smaller. So that's the same thing with technology with solar panels. If you get the more efficient versions, and one can imagine as material engineering gets better and better, they're going to get smaller and smaller. So it's doubtful that if we, not only doubtful, it's just not going to happen, that panels would become less efficient. So if you say the square footage at 625, you're always going to be able to power a house with that square footage. Now, you might be able to ultimately, you know, light up New York with that sort of square footage if the panels get that much more advanced. I don't think that's going to happen either. There's going to be a gradual increase in efficiencies.
And one thing for the councils, ComEd requires net metering anyway. So what happens is you're actually tying it into a meter that they're powering. So they're measuring how much power in and out, and if you produce more power, they're required by state law to buy it back from you. That's why it's a net metering system. So if you have a panel, say you have a really efficient panel, they have to buy it back. Other than that, they measure everything you're producing, and that's the way the metering system's set up for them.
And to Lowell's point, the incentive to sell power back to the grid, to buy a much more efficient panel and sell power back to the grid, there's actually a disincentive for that. You're better off buying a cheaper panel and just powering your house, because you sell power to the grid at about half to 40% of what you have to buy it for, because you sell it back at wholesale. You're buying with all the tariffs and taxes, which if you look at your bill, it's about half of it. So you're not going to, in a residential install, you're not going to get rich selling back to the grid. So you're better off cutting your price on buying the panels up front and just power your own house. I mean, in an ideal world, you'd never sell. You'd use every kilowatt you produce, and you would never sell anything to the grid, because you're only getting 40 to 50 cents on the dollar for it. If that makes sense, it's a difficult process to understand. But to get back to Alderman Clem's comment, the idea with the special use and the yes, there's more of a process to it with a special use. The reason I'm as we're talking about this, and I'm warming up to that idea, is as Alderman Chesney points out, it creates a disincentive, but not a barrier. So if I have the choice of putting up ground mounts or roof mounts, it's a lot easier for me. If ground mounts are a special use, it's a lot easier for me to put the roof mounts, and that's what we're trying to encourage. But on the other hand, the city is not saying you can't do ground mounts. It's just that we need to let your neighbors know what you're doing, get input from the community around you, and evaluate the process. By adding the specific restrictions that we had for the permitted use ordinance, we're also giving the ZBA a little bit of guidance in terms of what's okay and what's not. So you don't have to subject the ZBA to all these different kinds of installations of differing sizes and that sort of thing that they have to make tough decisions on. You can say, look, here's the envelope that we're going to allow special uses in, and after that, they're just not allowed in residential. Now, I would suggest probably making that envelope in maybe like R1 through R4, single-family residential. You've got R5 and R6, which you could either leave as a permitted use or you just make a special use without specific restriction. Because that's multifamily, that's going to be apartment complexes and that sort of thing.
Mr. Chair,
Attorney Cox.
go ahead.
Okay, Attorney Cox, okay. Getting back to the roof mount and the ground mount. What's gonna be the, should we say, the durability? I mean, the ground mount is gonna be a lot better in a windstorm compared to the roof mount. And, do we have any information or specifications on that?
Excellent question. Actually, the roof mounts, they fall under, there's very specific mechanical standards for installing those things. And we've actually specified at the request of the building commission, actually specified that they have to be mounted to structural members. So, and they're mounted very close and parallel to the roof line. So in terms of the ability of the wind to pry those things off, of course, if you get into a tornado or something like that,
Right.
not much you're going to do about that. But they are, as far as I'm aware, they're very securely attached. And to be fair, so are the ground mounts. They're set on the fairly large, sturdy metal frames, which most of them aren't actually mounted in concrete. Most of them are just piled into the ground. But, as far as industry standard goes, I think there's the building code requires a certain wind load requirement, and I think that's 70 miles per hour, something like that. So that all of those design standards are taken care of through building code and that sort of thing, that the building department would inspect and make sure that the panels that are being used are installed correctly as part of the permitting process, whether it's a special use or a permitted use.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Quinn.
Having talked over about the special use permit, I can buy into it with the fact that, of the switch around and you're talking where you're going to go to one and a couple weeks later you're going to go to the other one. We just saw before where if somebody couldn't get a quorum this month, then you're out of sync and you don't get any place. So, no, I agree that, there should be some oversight. There's no problem with that.
So is it the council's pleasure that we come back with, just so that I have this right when we go back to the council floor? My understanding is we go R1 through R6 are a special use. R1 through R4 will have a restriction on the envelope that the special use can be granted in. R5 and R6 would be without the envelope and would be evaluated on a case-by-case. That's how I'm understanding things currently. Is that correct or not correct?
Mr. Chair,
Alderman Keiser.
and we're speaking specifically for the ground mount.
Correct. I'm sorry, I didn't clarify. Yes.
Yeah,
the ground-
okay, just
ground
kind of
mounts.
clarify that so we
Yes,
know
I'm
where
sorry.
we're
Yes.
standing here. And yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I think, yeah, we're in the right direction with that.
Okay, any other further discussion?
You had a motion for it?
So we'll go ahead and make this change, and with council's approval, we'll bring it in front of the next council meeting on Monday because you already had a first reading, so this will be a modification for second reading of the ordinance.
Don, Mayor, Sally, everybody good?
I'm good.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Alderman Keiser.
Director Cole, one thing I would kind of like to see is I've had several constituents that are still confused about this ordinance as what's going on. And I know we've had some media coverage and stuff. Is there something, we could get something in the Journal Standard or have some advertising or stuff on it to get more education out there for the people? Because I do get several phone calls on that asking what's going on. So,
We'll go multimedia here. We'll go Facebook, Twitter, Journal Standard.
Okay, thank you, because like I said, there is confusion, you know, as to what's going on, I think even on this council floor a little bit sometimes. So I think an education program would be very, very beneficial.
Thank you.
Okay, if we have no other further discussion, we can move on to number 9. Discussion of
Chair.
recommendation.
Chair. Madam Clerk, could you please note that Alderman McClanathan just entered? Thank you.
We'll try number 9 again now.
Right.
Discussion of recommendation of approval from the Historical Preservation Commission.
Actually, it's number 8.
Number 8.
Services.
I jumped again. Just a minute. Yes, I did. Okay, we'll back up to discussion of engineering services by Fair and Graham. Manager Crowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what we've brought forward to you is an engineering services agreement we have set with Fair Graham for water and sewer. And what is this based upon is the state has changed the way they're doing their IEPA loans, where they're forgiving $1.5 million for a community of our size and our financial. So Director Bucus and I actually went to a brief at IML recommended that start going into a every 2-year borrowing of $2 million, and then they'll forgive that. But in order to do that, we need to have the engineering done and the permit process. One of the things that we're working on, like right now, is Float Street. Float Street, we are still waiting for the IEPA permit, I believe, right, to come back. We're going to have the bid in, but it takes us 60 to 90 days to get that done. And that really, you need an environmental civil engineering to do that. Director Carr is very capable. However, he is not an environmental civil. He is a transportation civil engineer. So there's a separate set of expertise. What this would do is this would establish a service agreement with Fair Graham to do that engineering service. So we're constantly have ready off the shelf for the next set of loans so that they can keep working. The maximum amount is the $200,000. They will only charge us up to the amount that we have to do. The Float Street project was $78,000 as we go forward. So that kind of gives you an idea of what this is, and this is what the amount is. So this will allow us to consistently tap into those $2 million loans and give us forgiveness of $1.5 million on that.
Okay, do we have any further discussions on it?
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, Alderman Clem.
is this a state that's going to give us this money back? Our state?
Our state, IEPA.
Okay. We're gonna really buy into that.
That's what
I say that kidding, you know.
They've briefed it both at IML and then Adam has.
Yep, madam.
You need to step up to the mic, please, Adam.
To answer your question on the IEPA revolving loan for water and sewer, actually the principal of forgiveness, the federal government is giving each state X amount of dollars to distribute to encourage municipalities to fix their infrastructure of water and sewer. So it's actually the forgiveness part is a federally funded part of it.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, Alderman Busker.
Yeah, with this revolving loan fund here, was this factored in when we raised the rates for water throughout the city to take care of those issues?
Not to this level. This is a program that's occurred just within the last year. Where they were talking about it at last IML conference. They've officially announced it about 4 months ago, 5 months ago. It's when you came in when we started talking about this proposal. Is that about right?
Yeah, basically the IEPA, the revolving loan program is an annual cycle. So July 1, the new principal forgiveness criteria came out along with the interest rates, and that'll apply till June 30th of next year. So in order to qualify for this year's program, you've got to have your permits, you got to have your bids, you got to get your loan paperwork, and all that has to be executed before the end of next June. But to answer the question, I think we're trying to find a mesh of your capital improvement program for 5 years, and how can we counterbalance that, use some of the loan monies to extend your dollars and do those as efficiently as possible. So we're not creating new projects to go into this loan program. It's mirroring your capital plan that you put forth here in the next 3 to 5 years.
Thank you. Dennis, is there anything else you want to add to that?
You've covered it pretty well.
Sure.
Alderman McLean.
Thank you.
I think that's.
Manager Crow, could you highlight, again, the percentage that they're forgiving now versus what the percentage was earlier? And then part two, would be walk us through how, as you indicated, obviously we've got new funds coming in and we're trying to maximize those, stretch those dollars out. But how is this engineering agreement going to streamline us, be more efficient for us than how we've currently been handling these prior loans?
So I'll handle the first part, and then I'll turn over to Adam for the second part here. So by pre-approving this, it will allow Fairgram to go based upon what we have and approved in the capital plan, what council has approved to go forward with the replacement of piping. They'll already start working on it. It doesn't require us to come back and get an engineering agreement approved. So that streamlines so we can continually work those projects. It took Fairgram 4 months to do the work for Float Street. 2 months. Well, I'm counting the permit time that we haven't got back from. He says 2 months. We still don't have the permit back to do the Float Street work. So it'll allow us to move more quickly through the capital program. Now, the loan, I'll turn that over to Adam because.
Like I just said, the loan is changing the criteria every year. It's a viable program. So last year, the reimbursement or the forgiveness was capped at $500,000. So this year, the new criteria came out, and we can go up to 1.5 in principal forgiveness at 75 cents on the dollar, basically, that we would get in principal forgiveness. So basically, you do a $2 million project, you get 75% reimbursed through that, and you're only paying $500,000. So it's a changing program, but I think as we're learning with your capital improvement plan and so much work to be done, we need to kind of get into a cycle. Instead of doing a $10 million project and only getting $1.5 million forgiveness, we should break it into smaller projects and do them more frequently, so to take advantage of what the government's giving for those incentives.
And where this idea came from, like I said, Director Bucas and I went to IML last year, and more of the communities across Illinois are tapping into the forgiveness program and doing it in small chunks. So saying, all right, we're going to replace 2 miles or 3 miles of water main or sewer every year, and doing it in small chunks versus trying to get the big chunks done.
And just to note, I mean, it's in the agreement in the attachment part. This isn't an open checkbook for us to just go start, billing time. There's a check and balance built into the service agreement that we would have to run man hours and cost estimates and run that past your Director of Public Works to make sure that he's comfortable with those hours. We have negotiation back and forth if it's too high, too low. And that's a check and balance that's put in place. So I guess I know that gives some people some hesitation. We're just having a blanket order, but it's not uncommon to have a general work order, to do these services on an as-needed basis. Another comfort level is we do have a similar service agreement with City of Rockford just on their water department for similar dollar amounts.
And I worked on this same when I was in my previous community. I worked different, one of the Fairgrounds competitors, but we worked on the same type of replacement and engineering. There it worked on, and this is one of the things, they worked on a percentage basis of the contract each year.
Mr. Chair.
Alderman Keesling.
Yes, Manager Crowe, couple questions. Number one, you said that it's every 2 years we would be applying for this?
No, the goal is to every year go in for loans with a forgiveness based upon what we're seeing from the state on the forgiveness. This will allow us to say we have 2 miles, have a mile, 2 miles worth of work, get $2 million, keep that at $2 million to 2 to 3 based upon what our capital improvement fund is. And it really maximizes that money and that's about the maximum. 2 miles of pipe or 3 miles of pipe is about the maximum we can do at any one time. I mean, giving examples, Float Street is going to be, as we're replacing that, we'll have a good 10 blocks, would you say, torn up while we're doing that replacement. So we don't want to impact a huge sections of town, but plan this in the capital improvement plan so that we are replacing that amount of pipe.
Follow up then, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Okay, and you had also mentioned that a lot of other communities are getting on board with this. Do you feel it's going to affect our abilities to be able to get this grant? And is there a cap on how much money they have available to be able to use that, we get too many communities on board, it's going to be harder and harder for us to get?
I'm going to turn to my 2 experts here.
Take it? Okay. It's a loan program, so it's not a grant. The loan criteria is set forth, like we just said, it's set for a year. They look at it on a priority basis. So the state looks at your project, what your needs are, and then they rank that against other communities in the state. So it is a little bit subjective, it is competitive. The priority list moves up and down, but as projects are getting done, the longer you're in line, you move up. So if you have a low priority project, you'd still be eligible, but they may tell you have to wait a year to get the funding. Right now, as you know, the priority is water supply, and that's what we're working on right now, is to get your well and make sure we've got sufficient water supply, and that's a high priority for not only Freeport, but in the state's eyes, that's a huge issue. So you would be very high on that priority list.
One more follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Alderman Keesling.
That's more of a statement than a question. I from what I'm understanding here, I kind of think this is a no-brainer. There's money out there for us to use. We can get 4 times the use out of our money by going through this program. I don't see why we're not going, I don't see why we shouldn't go for it and make the best use out of it as we can. We all know what our water and sewer system condition is, and if we can get 4 times use out of our money, I say we go for it.
Yeah, Alderman McLean.
Adam, you've been involved in this for quite a while. How does this relate to and also Lowell, for the forgiveness to the loans that we had on the last 2 big projects that we had? I mean, that was based more on a percentage, and I even know one of them, I think, had forgiveness after the whole deal was cut and everything.
I think the final forgiveness was 60% on that, or 50%.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd have to look up the numbers.
No, that's okay.
They're much more lucrative than what they're offering today because they've capped them. So I'd have to, like on the big 4 supplement on that 8 million, I think we got over 2 forgiven on that.
Right, that's what I was going to say. We had $2 million forgiven on the 8 million. On the $7 million project we just did, we had I think 1.8 million.
Okay. I mean, which is great when you're talking about getting forgiveness on any loan. Hey, it's a bonus. Thank you. Would you like a motion to move this to, make a motion that we move
Second.
this to council?
Wait for him to
I
finish.
think you already got a second, yeah.
Well, go ahead and make the motion.
Made, oh, we got.
Made and
Made
second.
and seconded already.
Huh?
Sorry, I jumped the gun in a second.
Second over here.
Okay then, yeah. Alderman Clem and Alderman, Busker.
Aye.
Yeah, there we go.
Aye.
Okay. Yeah. All in favor, please, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Now we'll get to number 9. Discussion of recommendation of the approval from the Historical Preservation Commission. That's going to be with the City Manager Crowe and Finance Director Buckets.
I'll turn it over to Director Bugers first, and since both of us worked on this, but along with Aaron, but I'll.
The Historic Preservation Commission completed their review of the facade grant application and is recommending that we increase the ceiling on the grant from $10,000 to $15,000. Additionally, they've also requested that a plaque or some type of recognition be placed at the site of the of where the facade improvements being made. They talked about a brick, a decal. They haven't made a final decision on that. But the money to pay for that plaque would come out of the port to paint the port funds. It would come out of any city funds. Additionally, the applicants will be required to receive a certificate of appropriateness prior to moving forward with their application or with their project. And the Historic Preservation Commission will give the certificate through a public hearing process. The way we're scheduling it is that after they receive the applications, there will be a public hearing prior to their normal meeting time, and after their public hearing, they'll have their meeting and then either approve or deny not only the application for appropriateness, but also the grant application as well. The grants are limited to the downtown area, and applications will start. They'll start accepting applications once the City Council approves the form that we're using, and the applications will close on February 1st of 2019. The Historic Preservation Commission is also planning a workshop with the downtown business owners and property owners to review the grant application and what the steps are in the whole process, and this is being planned for October. After the deadline, the Historic Preservation Commission will conduct their public hearings and their meeting on February 19th with a recommendation to City Council on or about March 4th, 2019. The deadline to complete the approved projects is August 30th of 2019.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Director Buckets?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Alderman Bradshaw.
thank you. I understand the funding is coming from Paint the Port for the plaques, but the funding increase, is that coming through TIF funding?
Well, it's both TIF and Paint the Port. We allocated $30,000 in our budget, and then they're going to come up with another 10 to possibly 15.
So, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So not only are they paying for the plaques, but they're actually helping fund that increase?
Yes.
Wonderful, thank
Yes.
you.
And the certificate of appropriateness is already something that's in the city code. It was something that we didn't ensure that it happened the last time, and I verified it is already posted on the city's website for the form. So that's already posted, and what they're going to do is do the training in October to take it through the certificate of appropriateness.
Chair?
Yeah, Alderman McLeod.
Thank you, Director. I think this last year was the first year of kind of the new way of doing the facade program with the combination with Paint the Port and with those individuals involved. Did these recommendations largely come out of their experience over the past year and how they think they can, one, get a better field of applications, and two, better implement the product based on their experience over the last year?
I think what they're looking at is trying to get some of these downtown buildings that need a little more work than others to give them some encouragement to apply and to do some work on their buildings. Because actually by increasing the amount of money or amount of the grant, we're actually going to be limiting how much we're going to give out. But last year we did not give out all the money that we had allocated.
Chair,
Alderman Chesney.
have we looked at the certificate of appropriateness to see what that, I mean,
It is. In fact, I've got a copy with me.
do you find that it's, do you find it's a reasonable document that can be easily digestible and?
It is. It's very, it was passed in 2006. It's very upfront, forward. It basically says it asks what any historic information the owner may have about the building, making sure that they follow the plan, what the business owners on either side also have as we move forward into it, to really match that historical nature of the downtown.
Okay, and you don't feel that the document is reducing the number of applications because of its?
No, go ahead, Randy.
It shouldn't. I think that we're trying to generate more interest in the program, and I think hopefully we'll have more applicants this time than we did last time.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Clem.
Randy, have we taken and changed any of the parameters as far as work that can be done or anything like that to buildings?
No, they're still the same.
There is one change. So last year we had an award be given to one person that had already done the work.
Oh.
Yeah, and so this year they cannot do any of the work until approved by the Historic Commission and be approved by council. So we are not awarding any money for work that's already been done. This is strictly for work that will be done.
My question was more so, I know a few years ago they talked about adding on, and I don't know if they did for sure, I didn't look technically to see if there was roof work, more facade work, more roof tie-in, structural type stuff.
And it's, so they can do one side, it's got to have it has to have roof that's already intact.
Okay.
It's basically, it's set up to replace windows. In fact, under the certificate of appropriateness, it says roof repair and placement are the materials, the roof is in place already. That's under the certificate of appropriateness. But they can do gutter repair and replacement under this, window replacement, exterior painting, awning replacement, stoop repair.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mayor Miller.
we've got lots of guidelines for the business owners, but I'm not seeing where we have a guideline on what the Paint the Port is going to expect as a plaque. I'd hate to see, 8-foot sign on every building that says Paint the Port.
Yeah.
Mayor, the issue was they had initially submitted a plaque to us that was, our attorney felt that because it was a sponsorship plaque, was not appropriate. So I've asked Mr. Mead, who did the design on the plaque, to come back with another one of us. We'll have it for the council for their approval. But they wanted to put the sponsorship right dead center, and even the chairman of the committee approached me and said he wasn't comfortable with that, but he had so as they went forward. So
So those are still being ironed out then? Okay.
yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Alderman Bradshaw.
thank you. Lowell, are we looking then to put this on the regular council agenda for approval?
We are. The only thing that we're missing is that plaque design.
But if we put it on the agenda, that would be part of the presentation on the agenda.
My goal is to have it, we met with the Historic Commission last week. They understood it. They were going to go take that back and get that back before the council meeting on the 17th to me.
Okay, Mr. Chair,
Yes, Alderman Bradshaw.
I would like to make a motion to send this forward to the next council meeting for
Second.
consideration.
Second.
Okay, a motion made by Alderman Bradshaw has been seconded by Alderman Keister. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it.
Mr. Chair,
Alderman Alderman Keister.
Just one quick point on that. Just keep in mind that if the plaque is not there, we can always defer to the next meeting. We don't have to make a decision on it then. It'd only be the first reading anyway. So if it's not there, we can always move it forward.
This will not be this is not an ordinance, so it's just strictly approval, so.
Yeah, and if the plaque's not there, we could just move it to the next meeting. So at least it gets it on the agenda and gets it started.
Are there any other further questions in reference to this discussion? Okay, if not, we can move on to number 10, public comments. Tommy?
I got to mind Todd, this banquet on the 10th of October. Yes. And I hear you're going to get a award out for people? Awards for people's special awards?
Well, yeah, we get warrants occasionally, we do.
And you do a good job with that. and Ross, we already take care of that already about that thing about the mattress. So.
Yes, we will. Thank you, Tommy. Alderman Clem.
Yes, I'd just like to announce last week, the mayor brought up about it being Suicide Awareness Month. This Saturday, there's being a run held a motorcycle run from Rockford to Freeport to 2 other VA clinics, but they're stopping in Freeport here for lunch. If anybody would like to take part in that, I have a number that they could call, and the lunch is going to be at Route 26 on Saturday, and all of the monies that received will go to the Freeport VA for help with mental illness awareness and stuff for the veterans locally here. So if you'd like to participate, I have a number and stuff, but if you'd like to stop out there for lunch and donate or do anything like that, we'd surely appreciate it. Thank you.
Chair. Alderman Walker.
I'm not sure this is appropriate time, but I've had some inquiries. What is the status of the old City Hall building? People are getting very tired of the way it looks and the danger of it. What is the status on that? Can anybody tell me?
So we do have bids out. We have gotten a bid for demoing it. We are still listing it for possible sale as well.
Can you give me people want a time limit? We're talking years already. Can you say we can leave this another 5 years, or we can get rid of it?
It has to come to council for approval.
How do we get it there? I'm pretty adamant about this, so I just, I mean, yeah, we can sit here and blow smoke up people's butt and say, oh, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. It's already been all this time. Can we have some kind of time say, are we gonna get rid of this building, or? I think demolition's the way to do it, but that's only my opinion, but, I guess people are saying, I can't look them in the eye and say, well, we're working on it, or we're gonna do this. What do we do?
Well, may I? You know, my understanding is, again, that there was some bids in regards to demolition that I assume probably within the next period, it's a period of months, not years, but a period of months would be in front of us in regards to that. In the meantime, I know over the last year, Manager Crow has met with at least 5 or 6 developers in regards to taking them, presenting the property to them. My understanding is all of them came back with the same general information. Let's just to make a long story short, there was no interest on that. It's still marketed. We, when we made the decision about 3 years ago, almost, that we were going to come into this building, the issue then remained, what do you do with that? About a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, I'm a little loose in the dates because I wasn't expecting to give a full recitation on this, but over the last year and a half or 2 years, we received some bids for work to stabilize the building. And by stabilizing it, it involved roof work, it involved some of the soffit work and things of that nature. And that, if I recall, was in excess of $600,000 but under $700,000, which that was our exact reaction that you just gave right there. Which then led us to, again, Manager Crow is in here and has been actively still marketing the property, but in the absence of further developments on that or further other options coming forward, we're going to have to make a decision in regards to what are the bids and what are we going to do on that.
And our low bidder on it could not start the work until November, December anyway, because it was off-season and would take his entire crew. What we had to do is we had to go out and work with Fair Graham, because our initial bid was we were going to remove the asbestos and then demo it, and we found the combined bid was $500,000. So Fair Graham recommended to us that we combine the bids, having their environment, and do it as one, and it came in quite a bit cheaper.
So we're talking this year.
It's
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Alderman Clem.
if I could, and just to throw into the mix on this, since I've been around a day or two on this, one of the things that I hope people keep in the back of their mind on this is there is a reason that we moved out of the old city hall. It had a great deal of problems with air quality and other things, and also problems that the state brought forward on electrical issues and that kind of stuff. So it isn't as though we just moved out for the heck of it, you know. So, and everybody that does, as we know the building and look at it, there's a lot of spaces in there that are just spaces that can't be utilized for a whole lot of stuff, you know, like the big front foyer and all that, but it doesn't lend itself well to changes and that type of stuff from what we've seen. Is that?
So all the developers that we've had come in and say that there are really only two things that can be used for. One of them is a city hall. The other one is a motel, but they feel that the cost per square footage was in the area of $125 per square foot to $175 per square foot, which they can't make that for a motel. It won't work. So that's all the developers we brought in so far do not feel that that's.
Well, one of the comments I'm hearing, and it is sarcasm, so what they're telling me is if I owned a private building in this town that looked like that, we would not allow it to sit empty for 5 or 6 years and deteriorate worse. I do know how bad shape it's in. I was in there several times. So I'm just saying, people look at me and use that sarcasm, I can't come back with an answer. So I just, now at least I can tell them something. Thank you.
Or does the council have any other questions they may want? If not, we'll move on to 11, adjournment.
So I'll move.
Motion made by Alderman Keister, seconded by Alderman Callahan. All of them in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you.
All right, folks.
Yeah, of course.